Back before we had PC and Steam, Xbox and PlayStation, mobile platforms and the internet, people used to play video games on these hunks of metal. This prehistoric artifact that you're looking at is called an arcade machine. They had cute little 8-bit games on them, and you had to actually go outside to play on one, going to a designated place in the high street called an arcade to use the machine. And just like everything in life, they were powered by money. And electricity, obviously. Game designers needed to design their games directly around the arcade's method of monetization. They needed to make their games so that when you inserted a coin, you would only be able to play for a short amount of time before you had to put in another coin. Adding a timer to the top of the screen that ended your run the moment it struck zero would have been fairly depressing for the player. It could create a huge anticlimax in the middle of someone's run, and it would force players to rush through the game as fast as possible. Developers didn't want this, so instead, most developers settled on a lives system. You would have a finite number of lives, and when you died, you'd lose one life. After losing your finite number of lives, you had to put in another coin to continue playing. So of course, game devs at the time all made their games excruciatingly difficult and punishing, so that the arcade could squeeze as much money out of the poor little kids' pocket money as they possibly could. Donkey Kong, Castlevania, Ghosts and Goblins, Tempest, even Pac-Man, they were all really difficult games and they milked you dry for coins. But now, we fast forward to 1977. American audiences have just got their hands on the Atari 2600, a newfangled contraption called a games console. Other games consoles did exist before this one, but this one was significantly more popular than anything that had ever came before it. Its main selling point was that it allowed you to play arcade games right in the comfort of your own home. No longer did you need to go out to the arcade to play any of your favourite games. These games still had lives in them. They were just direct ports from the arcade machines. If you got a game over, you had to go back to the beginning, just like in the arcade. And most games even flashed insert coin on the screen after a game over, despite being the console version of the game. People didn't mind though, because they had access to all their favourite arcade games. But now, we fast forward to 1983. Nintendo releases the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and with it, they released Super Mario Bros. An incredible game, revolutionary, basically invented the platformer genre. And it too had a live system in the game. The reasoning behind this live system is most likely to make the game more difficult so that it would take longer to complete. Without a live system, this game could have been blazed through in a couple of hours. The live system wasn't there to make money like with old arcade cabinets, but in a time where technological limitations forced games to be quite short by today's standards, developers needed a way to artificially extend the average playtime of their game. The live system allowed Nintendo to achieve this by making the game more difficult for the consumer. It wasn't there for its original purpose, but it served a purpose nonetheless. But now, it's 2020, and Mark Brown at Game Maker's Toolkit has just uploaded a video asking if lives are outdated game design. Yes. Yes, they are. Wait, hold your horses, put down your pitchforks, please hear me out, wait. Lives are outdated game design, but I think they can have merit when implemented with a purpose. If you haven't seen his video, I'd recommend you go watch it. It's a great video and it will provide useful background info for this video. The link's in the description, so you should go watch it. Now I want to discuss the topic brought up in his video, because I feel like it's become a bit of an age-old question in the last 5 or even 10 years. The debate of should video games still use lives has been raging on for what feels like forever, and Mark's video is the best attempt at summarising the pros and cons of the debate that I've ever seen. So I want to use his video to springboard into a few more details that I think are worth talking about or emphasising. A live system in its most traditional form feels very tedious in a modern game, because it's just so antiquated. It can serve to make a game harder or make dying have more of a consequence, but these are things that can be done without having lives in the game. Difficulty can be achieved in a myriad of ways, and I personally feel that live systems make the difficulty feel a bit more arbitrary and cheap. Instead of the level design or the enemy design tripping me up, I'm being tripped up by tediously retracing my steps back through already completed content just because I died one too many times. In fact, Mark puts it quite well in his own video.
Most indie platformers have ditched the concept entirely, with Super Meat Boy maker Edmund McMillan saying, "Removing lives altogether lets the designer base difficulty more on the actual level design and challenge, and less around the penalty of losing lives and restarting." And now Crash 4 recommends you play in modern mode, which gets rid of lives and lets you infinitely return to those mid-level checkpoints.
When it comes to making the player's death feel more consequential, this can be achieved with lives, sure, but there are other less frustrating or less tedious methods to use instead. I know I talk about this game far too often on the channel, but Rain World does this very well. Instead of having lives, it has a checkpoint system in the form of hibernation. Every single round, you have to find enough food and then find a shelter to sleep in, and you need to do this all within a finite period of time. If you take too long, it begins raining, and the rain is so heavy that it crushes you to death. There is also a system called karma, which is indicated by these little markers that are displayed every time a round ends. If you die, this goes down a notch. If you survive, this goes up a notch. Your karma is what allows you to traverse from one area to the next. Major areas will be divided up by these gates, and if you don't meet the minimum level of karma that's displayed here, you can't pass through. This means that dying can be very punishing, because the more you die, the more successful cycles you have to beat before you can pass into the next area. This also means that instead of in a game like Celeste, where you just have to throw yourself at this room at any cost until you beat it, you have to beat a long sequence of rooms in a row to succeed. This isn't to mention that shelters in most parts of the game are spaced fairly far apart from each other, so that you have quite a long way to go between checkpoints. This forces the player to be careful, pick their battles, and make sure that they take enough risks to get to the shelter before the rain comes, but not so many risks that you fall off a cliff and die. Rain World is a game that manages to make your deaths feel very consequential and have a lasting impact on your game, and it doesn't need a traditional arcade-style game over to achieve it. The focal point of the GMTK video is the new Crash Bandicoot game. This game does something that I find very cool with its live system.
Before you get to play Crash Bandicoot 4, you have to make a big decision. I'm talking about whether you want to play in the modern or the retro playstyle, which is all about whether or not you want the game to feature a lives system.
This is something that I think's pretty clever, because it's kind of the best of both worlds, isn't it? The people who like the nostalgic feeling of the live system that was present in all of the other Crash games are free to play with that same system. But the players like myself who aren't a big fan of live systems in games can opt out, and it's right there at the start of the game, clear as day. Mark doesn't actually say whether he likes or dislikes live systems in games. He does a great job in all of his videos of just objectively describing the topic, giving all the pros and cons, and letting the viewer decide for themselves. But me, I ain't afraid of no opinions, and you can probably tell from the rest of the video that I'm not a fan of live systems, especially the very traditional game over types. But there are definitely pros of having a live system in your game.
Lives also create a very high value reward for players to find. If a 1-up mushroom or a Mega Man face is all that's between you and repeating half an hour of content, then that should really encourage players to hunt down 100 coins, play bonus minigames, find secrets, and take risks to get extra lives.
This is actually a very good point. It is something that can be achieved without lives though. For example, in Ori Will-o'-the-Wisps, you can find rare spirit shards which give you unique upgrades and abilities that help you progress through the game, like this one that makes your melee attacks reflect projectiles. These are not mandatory, but can be vital to saving your skin in a harder section of the game, and they are great at forcing the player to hunt for secrets. You don't need lives to recreate this sort of gameplay, but I will admit that lives are a very good way to do it. Extra lives are extremely valuable for the player to hunt down, especially in a more difficult game.
In Fury, you'll always start each boss fight with exactly 3 lives, which means you never begin a stage with an overblown advantage or a crushing disadvantage.
Now this is where we get to the good stuff, because in my opinion, if you're going to do a live system, it needs to be a bit more unique than your classic 1-ups and game over screens. Fury's 3 lives per level system is a very good way at making sure that your failures have larger consequences, but you can't gain or lose extra lives, so you don't end up with so many lives that the game is trivial, or so few lives that there's a random obtuse difficulty spike in the middle of the game. Another game that has a live system that I don't despise is Ikaruga. You can literally go into the settings and choose how many lives you want to have on your next run. You can even give yourself infinite lives. To me, this is as good as a live system can get. It gives you the option to turn it off if you aren't up for the increased difficulty or replaying the content. But you get to fine-tune how many lives you want, and as a result, fine-tune how hard your next playthrough will be. As you play the game more, you'll find yourself giving yourself fewer and fewer lives until you can beat the game deathless, which gives you a pretty awesome meta challenge of overcoming your own personal best using the live system that the game has given you. All in all, I don't think live systems are the worst things in the world. I just think that one too many developers overuse live systems in their games without really thinking about why they implemented lives in the first place. Looking at you, Nintendo, I think that lives should be thought about more carefully. You need to know why you want lives in the game, and your reason why needs to be more than just plain nostalgia. If you find that the result you're looking for can be achieved in a better or more meaningful way without a live system, then chances are you shouldn't use a live system at all. Thanks for watching.